Well, good evening. I'm Sue Hutchins once again with Iowa Prison Perspectives, and welcome to our interview today. Today is actually the 9th of April, and it's been a while since I've been here for a variety of reasons. So, welcome back, and I'm glad you're here. Some of you who have been here before already know this, but I'm going to say it because I always do, because there will be some new people. Iowa Prison Perspectives is a collaboration between Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, Iowa Cure, and the Iowa Justice Action Network. My reason for starting this particular YouTube channel was to inform you, the public, about what really goes on in prison, what it's like for people who are in prison, what it's like for people who love someone in prison, what it's like to work for the Department of Corrections, and what it's like for advocates who are trying to make some positive changes, not only for people who are in prison, but also for their families and their loved ones. I really hope to hear from you after you've listened to this, and I really hope to hear your opinions of whether you agree with what we're saying, if you disagree with what we're saying, if you think that we're doing the right thing, if you think we're doing the wrong thing, however you really feel, because this is really for the public. This is really for you to understand and get accurate knowledge about what goes on in the prisons from people who are either there or very close to people who are there. This evening's topic is a bit controversial, more controversial than topics I've done before. And I will let Amanda explain everything about why that is controversial. As she talks, she'll understand more and more about that. People who have offended in a sexual way have a different kind of experience in prison and also when they return from prison. And there are a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of myths about that particular offense. And one of the reasons that I asked Amanda to please come and do this interview is to clear up some of those myths, because she's very, very involved in working within and without of the system on this particular topic of offenses of a sexual nature. So, with no further explanation, I will introduce you to Amanda, and I will let her first of all talk to you about her prison experience in Iowa. So take it away, Amanda.
Thank you, Sue. So glad to finally be able to do this with you. I know it's been a long time. We've been trying for months to get our schedules, and I just thank you to taking this opportunity and allowing me to have that voice today. Because, like you did say, this topic is going to be rough for many people, but I want to start way back in the beginning. And my prison time started in May of 2003. I was sentenced to 25 years with an 85% mandatory. And for those that don't understand what that means is I have to do 85% of 25 years before I'm eligible to even have a chance at redemption and getting released. And there's another thing about that too, is a lot of incarcerated individuals, they will receive good time. So if they behave, they do programs and stuff like that, they can actually get their sentence reduced or go home sooner. But anybody serving a minimum mandatory in the state of Iowa, there is no good time. So entering this almost 18 to 21 years, I was like, what do I do? Because if I'm good or bad, I'm still going to go home the same day because I have no good time for them to take away. So it's like, what do I want to do? Well, before my incarceration, my therapist told me, Amanda, take advantage of this. Fix yourself, fix your heart, fix your mind, and get the tools necessary. Every tool that is offered to you, take advantage of it, because you're going to be locked up so long. Society's going to change and you're going to need everything so you can be successful. And I'm thankful for that advice going in.
Hmm.
So I started my first 8 years. I was at IMCC as a general population.
And that's in
And
Coralville. That's in
that's
Coralville,
in
Iowa.
Corville. Yes. So being a general population there, we were the ones that were running that facility. And I did have the blessing of many programs. Even though there was limited program, I did have some really good opportunities. During them 8 years, I was able to become a hospice volunteer. I was also an ADLA worker, which is an adult daily living assistant, which would be kind of like a nursing home. So we would take care of the individuals that needed them help. So the DOC wouldn't have to have all these high skilled nurses. They would have the nurses there, but the general stuff, helping them write letters and just helping them get dressed, just some very basic stuff. I was actually able to learn that skill. Not that I would ever be able to do that, but at least I had that opportunity.
Let me interrupt you for just one
Yeah,
minute because there are probably people who don't know what IMCC stands for. So would you talk about
yeah.
what those letters represent?
So IMCC is Iowa Medical
Classification.
Classification Center. And it's really weird because they continue to change it. They refer to Oakdale Prison, IMCC. You'll hear many different terms. And I don't know why, but that's a lot of the prisons are that way. They'll go by initials or they'll go by the actual name. But with it being in Coralville, it's kind of difficult because you say I'm at the Coralville prison and people are like, I can't find that one. So you have to explain it's Oakdale. So
Yeah. Thank you. I just, when you were
no,
talking about helping nurses and doing hospice and that sort of thing and helping the people who were sick, I just thought the public, if people are listening and they don't know that that actually is where people go initially to be classified, and it's also where people go who have serious illnesses,
yes.
whether they be medical or psychiatric. So anyway, go ahead. Thank you. So I
And
didn't mean to interrupt. I
no,
just,
you're fine. You're fine, Sue. So hospice was interesting because during my incarceration, my mother was battling cancer. So for being a hospice volunteer, I was
mhm,
like, this would be nice to learn because when I get out, if my mother is still alive and she starts getting to that end of life care, I'll have some skills and I'll be able to help the family here as we prepare for any family members. So that was a valuable life lesson that I had the opportunity to do. And I'm so thankful. But there's the downside too. I did have, I think, about 5 or 6 individuals during that time pass away.
mhm,
And that's tough.
mhm,
That's tough watching somebody that is going to die in prison. And
mhm,
Iowa doesn't have anything in their laws to allow these individuals to go home early. And to me, that's sad. There's no compassion. There's no compassion release in the state of Iowa. And so these individuals will end up dying. And as our prison population continues to get older and older, we keep having longer and longer sentences. More and more individuals are going to end up dying in prison. And that's sad. But that is what's nice about having the hospice program in several of the prisons is at least they'll have somebody with them. And when the family members come in to visit them, they are so thankful that at least they know their loved one is taken care of. And
mhm,
so that kind of warms your heart.
mhm. Yeah.
And one of the other blessings while I was there at IMCC was in 2010, I actually joined Mary Cohen's choir. This was in her second season. She came in December, and I was like, wow, choir in prison? I don't know. But after seeing the first show and how beautiful it sounded, I was like, you know what? Let's have some fun and let's join the choir.
Mhm,
So I got to do that for almost 2 years while I was at IMCC. And that was a blessing. Unfortunately, as many of us know, not you guys watching may not know, but when COVID happened, the choir actually got shut down, and it has been told they will not ever be allowed back in. And that's kind of sad in my heart too, because I know what it meant for the guys that were part of the choir and the volunteers that came in. It wasn't just for us, it was actually for the public. So when them volunteers would take off their Tuesdays to come visit, that helped them too. It helped them see us as humans, not as these monsters locked behind the bars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so in 2011, the end of 2011, I applied to have a transfer. And when you go to ask for a transfer, they always ask you for three places of where you would like to go. So I had to give them three other facilities that I wanted to go to. And I knew my ultimate goal at that time would have been to go down to Mount Pleasant, because at the time that's where people who needed sex offender treatment program had to go, was Mount Pleasant. So I says, well, I'll go to Mount Pleasant. I'll just hang out till it's time for me to get into my treatment. And sure enough, they sent me there. And I couldn't believe it. I thought they would send me somewhere else because I still had so much time, but they didn't. But once again, that was another blessing, because while at IMCC, I met a lifer. And it was when I went to Mount Pleasant, I connected with that lifer who asked me if I wanted the opportunity to work in a wood shop for Iowa Prison Industries. So while in Mount Pleasant from 2011 to about 2016, 17,
Mm-hmm.
I worked with Iowa Prison Industries in their wood shop.
Good
And
for you.
once again, it gave me them job skills.
Sure.
So while in the wood shop, I had the opportunity to learn the milling department, which is basically wood would come off of a semi, raw wood, and we would have to manufacture it from there all the way to the finished product. And at the time, we were doing dorm furniture for the three major universities: University
Yes.
of Iowa, Iowa State, and Northern Iowa. So we were the ones producing all of their dorm furniture. But that was, once again, I learned so much. I got to learn about all this equipment in wood shop. And once again, knowing when I get out, I can use this hopefully as a job skill if I ever would work in a wood shop.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty uneventful for them first 8, 9 years, but I was the lucky one. Not everyone had it as easy as I did. And I feel that it was God looking over me because he kept putting the right people in my life to protect me. But many people who come into prison with this type of a crime, it's rough. They get harassed, bullied. They get told they better check in or their life's going to be miserable. There's
Mm-hmm.
many of them get beat up for their crime. And instead of getting to know the person, all they're doing is looking at their charges. And as soon as they hear their charges, all of a sudden they start calling out names. And I will not repeat them names because they're not nice. But that's the prison mentality. People with this type of a crime of sexual nature, they're the lowest of the lowest.
Mm-hmm.
And in the prison anarchy, you're at the bottom of the totem pole and you're fighting for your life. But like I said, I was blessed the entire time. I did have some issues here and there, but I always just stood up for myself. I was always open and honest. If anybody come ask me, I'm like, yeah, this is what happened. Because I felt if I lied, they're going to know, because it's public record. They can just have their
Mm-hmm.
friends and family look you up and find out exactly what happened. So why not be honest? And I learned that early on. Just be honest. And then show them who you are, not who you were. Show them who you are today. And that's what I would always encourage those that end up going to prison is it's going to be rough. And I'm telling you, it's not going to be easy. I was one of the lucky ones because many of these individuals have a hard time. Many of them get to the point where they spend most of their prison sentence isolated
Mm-hmm.
in the hole because they're scared or they've
Yes.
been harassed or beat up. And They don't know what to do. They don't know how to defend themselves. So that's kind of rough. That's one of the rough things.
Well, and it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the attitude that you went into prison with was part of your saving grace. You didn't go in with a tough guy attitude and defensive. You went in to learn and to become a better person, to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And that makes a
absolutely.
difference. At least from what I've seen, that makes a difference no matter what your crime is. The attitude that you walk through the doors with and that you exhibit in the first, especially couple months of prison, really, really do set the tone for what your reputation is going to be for the
Yep,
rest of for your time. And
it
if you
is.
build a not such a good reputation, it's hard to get out of that. You know, things are easier to get into than they are to get out of. And
Right.
and so it's from the sounds of it, you went in the first time you walked through the doors, you went in to learn and grow and to become more of who you are, more yourself, and
Right.
not defend your crime and not defend your history, so to speak. So not to
Well,
impress people, not to defend blah blah blah.
and one thing I couldn't figure out was why do you guys want to get in fights all the time? Why get locked up in the hole? You don't get no commissary money, unless you got family sending you hundreds of dollars. You need them jobs. And so that was one thing I never understood why guys
Mhm.
would constantly get locked up in the hole. And even the ones that did have a job or a good paying job, they would do something stupid to get locked up. And it's like, start all over. Why would
Yeah,
you
and
want
then
to,
you lose your job. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, okay, you've been good for 6 years and now all of a sudden you get in a fight. Guess what? That one fight is going to carry the rest of your prison sentence. They're going to start looking at you different.
Hmm.
And you are correct. When them first 6 months, 1 year, you start getting them reports wherever you go, that paperwork follows you, and them guards are going to treat you different. And I noticed that too. When I
Hmm.
hit Mount Pleasant and started working at IPI, some of the individuals would be like, why are you so nice to some of these people that work out at IPI and not us? And then the officers would always respond, well, because they're making our job easy. They come in, they do what they're supposed to because they don't want to lose their job. They go out, they learn their job skills, they come back. You guys, we have to watch you 24/7, wondering what you're up to, who you're going to beat up today. So
Hmm.
it does make a difference on the correctional staff and their attitudes.
Yes. Yes. And I think people need to hear that from someone who's been there and take that to heart.
Yeah. Let your loved ones know, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
if that will follow you.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
And so my next place after that was Fort Dodge Correctional Facility. And that was a eye-opening experience for me because when I went to Fort Dodge, they actually had the dog program.
Hmm.
I knew they had the dog program, and I thought that was the nicest thing. And I walk into there, and the atmosphere of that prison was completely different. Them puppies changed people.
Hmm.
Them puppies would take the meanest, angriest person and make them a puppy,
Hmm.
because they had something to look forward to.
Well, and who doesn't love a puppy? I mean, come on. You
Yes,
gotta love a
absolutely.
puppy. You gotta love a puppy.
And I was actually part of the puppy program. I never actually had the opportunity to raise one, but I helped babysit many times. And working on the units where the puppies were,
Hmm.
the the correctional officers in that unit compared to the other ones treated you different because
Hmm.
they knew you were not going to do nothing to lose that puppy.
Hmm.
So you're going to behave. Whereas in the other buildings, that's where all the troublemakers, they were always having the fights. There wasn't no fights. I mean, there was a few, but not that many because everyone's like, we don't want to ruin the dogs.
Hmm.
we love this dog program here. And it was there where I once again, because of my experience at working for IPI and the wood shop, I had the opportunity when a job come open to start working at their textiles. So at Fort Dodge, and I believe Rockwell still does it, and Mitchellville, they have their textiles. So at Fort Dodge at the time, we were making all of the jeans and the jackets that the incarcerated
Wow.
individuals would be wearing. So
Mm-hmm.
they never bought them. It was literally made by incarcerated individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, I got to learn more job skills.
Mm-hmm.
And also working for Iowa Prison Industries, they had apprenticeships. So I actually completed two apprenticeships with Iowa Prison Industries. One was my wood making. I got a cabinet making certificate. And then by working all the different IPI jobs that I did, I was actually been able to get a supply chain one too. So
Awesome.
that is one of the benefits besides the pay is just learning the job skills. I
Mm-hmm.
work in a factory now, which is H&I Furnishings in Muscatine, and they're an office furniture. So that sewing that I learned at Iowa Prison Industries, the wood shop experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get to that later, but it was them job skills that allowed me to be successful when I get out to find a job because I
Yes.
had them skills.
Yes. And that really was the whole intent that Tim Deesberg developed all of those apprenticeship programs for. I mean, that was his whole motivation in developing all of the apprenticeship programs that pretty much went away after the murders, as you know. There were murders 4 years ago at Anamosa. A guard and a nurse were killed. And since that time, the Department of Corrections has taken away the majority of apprenticeships and programs, which those of us who are advocating really are advocating to bring those back because they serve the prison, they serve DOC, and they serve the person who's going to get out of prison, and they serve the community when somebody does get out of prison. So I'm glad you're talking about the benefit of those apprenticeship programs and the benefit of those skills because it's so important. It's so important for people to understand that. And I believe it's so important for the department to bring those programs and those apprenticeships back. And they're bringing them, a few here, a few there, but they
They
really need
are,
to. Yeah, they are. The
they,
graphic arts program is back. I want to say at Anamosa. I may be wrong. It may not be Anamosa, but one of the guys that I talk to regularly, I believe it's Anamosa. Um, and he wanted me to be sure to let Tim know that they brought that program. So I mean, I think that there is. I think that I know that. Well, I can't believe that the department doesn't realize the importance of those programs and bringing them back. I just know in my heart that they understand the value of that, both to the prison, because like when you're making all of the furniture for the universities are paying for that furniture, and
right,
they're paying the DOC, they're paying. I
to
mean,
cover the
DOC,
cost. Yeah,
yeah, DOC, yeah. They're benefiting, and it doesn't cost as much as if you go to a furniture shop to
mhm.
buy the furniture. And the people who are incarcerated are learning those skills. So it's a win-win all the way around. It's just a win-win all the way around. Um, with all of the programs, all of the apprenticeship programs. So I just want to
And
put the plug in for that because I think that's really crucial to give the guys and women who are incarcerated really valuable skills to be able to use when they get out here and for everybody to benefit from. So yes. Anyway, that's my little
well,
spiel.
and actually, I have a little inside information on that too. So, because of my advocacy work, I've been in some different meetings with Department of Corrections, Beth Skinner, Katrina Carter, and other DOC individuals. And I will let you know they are actually trying to bring a lot more of the apprenticeships back in. They're actually looking at expanding different job skills. They're
Good.
actually looking of bringing regular everyday jobs and businesses to come in and train in certain
Oh,
prisons.
good.
So yeah, I don't know, it's all in the works. They're getting ready to start thinking of it. So they are actually trying to do more hard skills and soft skill lessons where a company could come in, teach some incarcerated individuals some skills. So when they got out, then they can come work for that company.
That's awesome.
So it may take a little bit of time. As you know, things do not
Hmm.
move fast in the Department of Corrections, but I will let you know they are in them discussions, they are in them planning stages on how to bring more skills because they're understanding it because of individuals like myself that have had a voice now and can let DOC know this is the benefit of these programs. I am now successful because of these programs. You
Hmm.
should not be taking them away. You should be increasing them because the more skills that you give these individuals, the better chance is they will be successful.
Exactly. Exactly. Food, shelter, and a job is what
Yes,
people need, and support. But I mean, if you have all kinds of love and support, but you don't have any way to make money, it's a tough road.
it is. And then
So,
after Fort Dodge, then I eventually ended up at Newton Correctional Facility. And while I was there, once again, that's where I actually started advocacy, but didn't realize I was advocating because I was advocating for myself. Everybody kept telling me, you still have a long time before you're going to get into treatment. And when I arrived at Newton, I'm like, no, I'll probably be in treatment within a year. They're like, there is no way. Nobody has got into treatment that soon with that kind of a sentence. I'm like, well, 5 years ago, I started putting it into my counselors, little, speaking into their ears, like, do you realize there's a policy that
mhm,
says I can do up to my last year of my minimum mandatory at a work release center. So I was literally pushing him like, I want to get out at least a year early so I could finish my last year at a work release. So I started advocating for myself. As far as treatment, so at Newton, they have treatment for those who have a crime of sexual nature. I got blessed once again, Sue. I had a wonderful facilitator. Her name was Miss Montgomery. She currently is not a counselor anymore at Newton. I had heard that she's actually working with community corrections, possibly as like a parole officer. But everybody kept telling me, you don't want Miss Montgomery. I'm like, why not? They're like, because she's a hard ass. I'm like, no, that's who I want. I don't want a case manager or a treatment provider who's just going to let me skate by so they can get their numbers up and I don't improve myself. I want someone to help me understand my thinking.
mhm,
Why did I do what I did? And once again, I took them skills in treatment and I still use them today. Learning them life skills and the good lives model of having a balanced life,
mhm,
making sure that your life is balanced, it is so
mhm,
much better. When my life starts getting chaotic, I actually go back to my treatment and look at them life skills. Where am I out of balance? Well, all I am doing is working and working and working. I'm not doing no church. I'm not spending time with my family. I'm not doing any of my hobbies. I'm not doing all these other stuff. I'm only focused on one or two things. So my life is getting out of balance. So that was one of the nice things that I took from the program. But there's a downfall, and that's the program itself. Because Department of Corrections doesn't necessarily follow the model. There is a certain chapter in the Good Lives model where you're supposed to work on your sexual history. Well, the Department of Corrections wants you to basically write your autobiography from as young of age as you can all the way up to your incarceration. They want to know every little detail. And that gets scary for some people
Sure.
because they're already in prison for a crime of sexual nature. And now
Right.
you want me to say, oh, by the way,
Here's
when
what
I
I did,
was
and here's what I did,
7,
and here's what
this,
I
and 10, I did this. Now they're worrying if I confess or say this, are they going to charge me?
Mm-hmm.
Or even worse, are they going to try to civil commit me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest fear for the individuals at Newton is the civil commitment. Because a
Mm-hmm.
civil commitment, as you know, Sue, many in the public don't know, but they can keep people past their sentence if they deem that they should be civilly committed. And that's sad
Well, and
because,
they can keep them for years, not
yeah,
just a little while, but I mean years and years and years and years after you've served your sentence, if
while
they
you're
deem
waiting,
you as a risk to
yes,
reoffend. And that's based on a lot on your history.
it is. And it's history even in prison too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, like I said earlier, that's why if you stay out of trouble, your life will actually be easier.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, that's a catch 22 in any kind of therapeutic program that is in a prison situation where the people that want you to tell them your deepest, darkest secrets are also the people who can keep you there for the rest of your life. I mean, it's, I used to work in the federal system in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I had guys coming out of prison who had done a minimum of 10 years. And the RDAP program was what I did, and the TDAP program. And those were along the same line. You're supposed to bare your soul to other prisoners
Right.
and to the counselors. And you're supposed to also tell on your other prisoners that you're in the program with.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's really putting the guys in a bad position a lot of times, just a lot of times. I
It
mean,
does.
I I used to think, boy, I mean, I want to I if I were you and I were in prison, I would want to be honest, but I don't think I'd do it there. That's just me. I don't think I wouldn't tell all. I know I wouldn't tell all because of what you just said. I just wouldn't do it.
Right. Right.
I just wouldn't do it. So, anyway,
Yep.
that's one of the downsides of a therapeutic program in a prison setting where the therapists are part of the system. I believe in order for for a truly therapeutic program to work in a prison system, you have to have outside therapists who do not have to report every single little thing that you say to the department.
Right.
That's that's a flaw
It
in
is.
my mind. That's a flaw of the system. So
It is. And if you want them to be honest, make it so your facilitators aren't mandatory reporters and they can't use it against them. If you really want to truly help these individuals and you want to make sure they don't reoffend and harm another child, then allow them to be able to be honest and give them
right.
the real help. But too
Mhm.
many are scared. Too many are scared of the consequences if they're too honest. And that's
And
sad.
rightly so. And
Yes,
rightly so. And then they get labeled as, well, they're not honest and they're manipulative. And my answer to that is no, they're just not stupid. They're just not stupid.
right. And how do you know? How do you know I'm manipulating? How do you know I'm not telling you the truth? You don't know my life. I live my life.
Right.
And for to have a staff member saying, oh, I don't believe it. I think you're lying or you're not telling the truth, and then kick them out of treatment. They lose good time. And once
Mm-hmm.
again, it's a flawed system. And it's
Yeah,
something I
it is.
hope they actually start looking at.
Yeah. I hope, yeah, I really hope so. Same way with substance abuse treatment in prison. It's the same dynamic.
Absolutely.
You just have
So
to be able to be free to tell the truth. Anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean
so
to.
I
I
got through my
diverged.
treatment and we're getting close. And I'm like, still a long ways away, but let's see what happens. And I started just asking them, I'm done with treatment. I've done everything required by law. They're like, yes, but you still got 4.5 years left of your sentence. I'm like, Yes, but you could let me go home early. And that was a fight, but I was able to get an interview with the parole board and they actually granted me an early release. And I was so thankful because of that from the parole board to have that early release, because then that gave me the opportunity to prove myself once I got released.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you're still going to supervise me for the next 3.5, 4.5 years. Why not let me out? Let's see if all this time that I did and all these things that I did I truly change, or am I going to go right back? So when I got released, first thing they tell you when you get to that work release is you got to have a place to go and you got to have a job if you want to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I already had a house lined up. I already knew where I was going. I just needed that job. And I didn't really necessarily want to work at a couple of the factories that were employing people from the work release. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? As a kid, I was a dishwasher. I just need a job that pays some bills and I can prove that I'm a hard worker.
Mm-hmm.
So I got blessed and got a job right away at a national chain restaurant, which I will not mention their name, but I should, but I won't. I'll be nice. They hired me knowing I was a convicted felon, but they didn't know what the conviction was. And unfortunately, 4 months in, one of the managers actually Googled, found out, and went to corporate. And I got suspended for 1 month while they investigated, called me back into the restaurant and said, by the way, you didn't disclose during your interview. And I says, yes, I did. I told the person that I interviewed with that I had a class B felony in the state of Iowa. And he asked me, do you want to talk more about it? And I said, nope, it's public record. If you want to know more, look it up. He goes, did it have to do with money? Because we're a restaurant.
Yeah.
Nope. Wasn't robbery or forgery? Nope. Okay, you're good. Come to find out, and those that are on the registry, they won't allow them to work. It's their corporate policy.
Wow. And that's true a lot of places. I mean, that's true a lot of places, which
Yeah.
is a good segue into talking about that very dynamic, which is a lot of what we're here to talk about this evening. But before we get really into that, let me thank you very much for sharing your experience so that people can hear what it was like for you incarcerated and what the different prisons were like and what worked and what doesn't work. I very much appreciate that. So thank you very much for that, Amanda. And now, if you want to go into what you were about, what you had just started talking about, that would be wonderful.
Yes. Well, let me real quickly. So I ended up getting the job at my current location, and that was at H&I Furnishings. And when I went in for my interview, after I filled out my application, she's like, there's an 18-year gap in your employment history. Do you mind explaining that to me? And I smiled at her and I'm like, I am so glad you asked me that question because I learned this while incarcerated for 18 years. And I would happily tell you what I did because I didn't just sit there and gamble and play cards and get in fights. I made myself better. And after explaining all of my skills that I learned in prison,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, we have 7 plants here in our town and they're all different. She goes, I have a feeling if we hired you, you could probably work in any of our plants and excel. And I told her, I says, yeah, that's the biggest question. Do you want to take that chance of hiring a formerly incarcerated individual? And before you answer that, you do realize that by hiring me, there's benefits. There's benefits for your company. And the biggest benefit is I have to have a job. I'm still on parole. I have to have a job or I can get sent back to prison for not having a job. That's part of my parole agreement was I had to maintain a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
So at least for the next 3.5 years while I'm on probation and parole, you're guaranteed I'm going to show up every single day because I have to do this or I go back to prison. And I come to find out our company does not like to hire formerly incarcerated individuals, which I will probably work with that in the future with them eventually.
Yeah.
It'd be like, you took a chance with me. Why don't you take a chance with others?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, you also get a tax break. Companies get a
yes,
tax break
yep.
if they hire a formerly incarcerated person. So,
I mean, that's once again educating the public and educating the businesses. Former incarcerated individuals are your best choices, actually,
mhm,
because they have a lot to lose because
right.
they need that job. They got to, they're trying to start all over. They need that job to have that money so they can save up for a place to live and for a vehicle to
Mhm,
get them to work. So it's very valuable that you hire them.
mhm. Yes.
And in 2003, we'll go ahead and start talking about the advocacy if that's okay, because that's
Yes,
pretty
that's
important.
wonderful. Yes, thank you.
So in 2023, I received a letter from Iowa Central Community College, which I took some college classes while I was incarcerated. And it was because of that education, they were starting a consortium here and they wanted former incarcerated individuals who had a college experience to advocate. So I did the whole interview process and was one of the 5 fellows selected to be a representative of the former incarcerated individuals as we advocate for the higher education in the prisons.
Good.
And that was in the beginning of 2023. In November of 2023, I had my first trip out of the state of Iowa. I went to Atlanta, Georgia for a conference on higher education in prison. And it was during this conference that I got to meet so many other formerly incarcerated individuals who were given that opportunity when they got out to help these nonprofits and help these other organizations with higher education or criminal justice reform. And meeting so many former incarcerated individuals and seeing how successful they were,
Mhm,
I was like, I want to be part of that.
mhm.
Fast forward just a couple months later, I get this letter in the mail from Heather Wagner telling me about Iowans Unafraid, an organization that she started just a few years ago because her husband was incarcerated for a crime of sexual nature and nobody was there to help her or her husband out. So she got with a friend who was in the same situation. And they're like, we need to start this organization. There's not one here in Iowa. There's no one helping the formerly incarcerated individuals who have this type of issue
Exactly.
going on in their life on top of everything else, being labeled a registered sex offender in the state of Iowa.
Mhm.
And that's when my advocacy work actually started taking off was with Iowans Unafraid. And just to give the public a little information about Iowans Unafraid.
Mhm.
So, Iowans Unafraid is a grassroots effort. It's all run by volunteers, no one is paid. Some of it is people that are on the registry, some of it is family members.
Speak to what the registry is, what that is, because there
So,
might
the
be people.
yeah, so the Iowa Sex Offender Registry, anybody in the state of Iowa that has been convicted of numerous crimes in the state of Iowa can land somebody on the sex offender registry in Iowa. And the media will tell you that everyone on this registry are a bunch of monsters. But I'm here to tell you that is false information because there is so many ways that somebody can land on the Iowa sex offender registry. And just a few examples that are going to blow your guys' mind. What about your local drunk who gets a public intoxication for peeing in
Mhm.
the alley? That will land him on the registry. What about a couple high school individuals who are having a sexual relationship? One's 17, one's 13 or 14. All of a sudden, one of them individuals turns 18 and the other one isn't 18. And the state of Iowa, that will land you on the sex offender registry. It was okay up to that point you turned 18. But soon
And
as
then
you
once you're an adult, you are
you're an
having sex with
adult,
a minor. Yeah.
now
A
you're having
person
sex
who
with.
is not, yeah, not emotionally and mentally capable of making the decision to have sex.
And what worries me the most today is our kids and their cell phones, because sexting is a big problem in our schools. And once
Mhm.
again, that
Mhm.
is by law considered child pornography. So
Mhm.
even though it could be yourself at age 16 and your girlfriend, who is also the same age, are exchanging these nude photos, by law, the state of Iowa says that is child pornography, even if
Mhm.
it's yourself, because you are under the age of 18. And that will end up putting people on the registry.
Mhm.
So it's not these scary stranger danger, look out for your kids. No, most of the individuals on the registry, 95% of the people that end up on the registry knew their victims. It's usually a close family member or acquaintance. So that is one of the myths that we as an organization are trying to get out to the public, is give them the facts. Just recently, I learned that the Department of Justice did an investigation on the average age of somebody who gets on the registry, and it's actually like 17. And
Really?
yes, and all across America, we are putting so many juveniles on the registry for the rest of their lives. There's been people as young as 8 years old that have been put on the sex offender registry. And some states, that's automatic lifetime. Just
That's
recently,
insane. That is insane.
just
That
recently, within the last year, there was a individual who was 12 years old when he committed his crime in the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois juvenile court said, stay out of trouble till you're 18. We will not put you on our registry here in Illinois. Does therapy for 2 years, has moved on with his life, and then moves to Iowa. And one day, the Scott County Sheriff's Department knocks on the door, threatening to arrest the mother for child endangerment because she did not take her son, who is 14, down to the sheriff's office and register him as a sex offender in the state of Iowa. Despite Illinois saying he didn't have to, Iowa says it doesn't matter. We want you on our registry so you can monitor this. So now you got a 14-year-old in junior high, can't have a computer, has to do all of his work by hand, has to be escorted. How is that fair to our kids? How is that fair to this 14-year-old? They already struggle with bullying in school. Now you got your classmates asking, why does this person have to get escorted? Why can't they use a computer?
yes, yep. That it is a big myth, like you said, that the people. I mean, I think that the public really wants to believe that everybody on the sex offender registry has brutally harmed a child or another human being. I mean, brutal,
Yeah.
not just sex, but brutal sex, and that they are a danger, an actual danger to society, a danger to your children, a danger to my children, a danger to women in general. They're just a danger. And if that were true, if that were true and that's what the registry was doing, I think that the support of it might be necessary. Just like I think there are some people who belong in prison. I'm all for people getting out of prison, but I do think that there are some people that are too dangerous to be among us because they really are dangers. And that's true of some sex offenders also.
Yeah.
But by and large, that is not the case. It's just not the case. And the public is not aware of that. I happen to have a friend who was on the registry for being drunk and urinating in public. And they got that was public indecent exposure and public blah 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 blah
Yeah.
on the sex offender registry. Finally got off, but he was on for like 10 years, 12
Yeah.
years. I don't even know. I mean, I don't even know how long. Uh, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't
And
make
then,
any sense to me. That's
and
a
then,
sex. That doesn't make any sense to me.
and what's really bad too, Sue, is what about those who were victimized themselves as a child? Never got the help because they were too scared to let somebody know this had happened to them until the point where they end up abusing somebody else because
Mhm.
that's what they were taught. That's what they were learned. That was a learned skill or a learned trait. And then they end up abusing somebody. And then maybe that family member abuses another family member. And now all of a sudden you got 3 or 4 generations that have abused people until someone gets caught. And that's
Mhm.
something else people don't understand. Like you said, the registry has a variety of people. In the state of Iowa, last I had checked, we were close to 7,000 individuals in the state of Iowa.
Mhm.
And just like our prison population, those of an African descent are more likely, those that are Black are more likely to end up on the registry.
Right.
And you can actually go on to the Iowa Sex Offender website and you
Mhm.
can daily check the stats. You can
Yep.
find out how many people in your county where they all live, but you can also figure out how many are, you know, young, old. It's all public record.
Mhm.
But then once again, what we don't understand as a public is there's consequences to this registry being public. And
Yes.
that's the unintended consequences. What about the children of those that are on the registry?
Right.
Oh, your dad's on the registry? So now that kid's going to get bullied.
Mhm.
But worse yet, what about a family member like an adult or a spouse? And that individual has to go get a job and they do a criminal background check. And in that criminal background check, it comes back their address as a sex offender. They may not have committed that crime, but their address is labeled that.
Mhm.
So they cannot get jobs. And then you have the individuals on the registry. The registry is about 26 pages of rules. You need to literally be a lawyer, and I don't even think lawyers can understand all the rules and regulations on what it would take to get you violated. And then a simple violation. I just heard recently of an individual who got a cash app. That's a money transaction app and did not report that. The parole officer revoked them and sent them back to prison because
Mhm.
they consider that an internet identifier.
Mhm.
But if you read The
Mhm.
actual policy and the actual code, all it says is internet identifier. Well, what is an internet identifier? It's left up to the police officers to interpret that. And you better hope you understand their interpretation, because your
Mhm.
interpretation and their
It's
interpretation,
really, yeah. And it's your life, and it's you that's going to prison. Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I want to mention, along with what you have said, is the young girls who present themselves and tell that they are older than they are
Yep.
and end up having sexual relations with a 20-year-old man, and they're really 16, but they've said they were 18 or 19,
Yep.
and he ends up in a number of circumstances that I know of personally, he ends up going to prison.
Yep.
And nothing happens to her. Absolutely nothing happens to the young girl who has done that, who has presented herself as
No.
older than she is. There are no consequences for her.
And speaking of that topic, this year our legislators, I'm not sure if it actually got anywhere because I haven't checked on it recently, but they actually this year made a law that would allow police officers to pose as a minor to entrap an individual and it be okay.
To
They
entrap
literally
them?
to entrap them. So they would pose as a minor trying to get people, they would go to the websites or whatever to get people that have an addiction to a sexual addiction to pornography, get them to say, oh, yeah, I'm a 13-year-old. And so these individuals will
Oh,
go up.
okay.
The state of Iowa was trying to make that
Mhm.
so that was legal for a police officer to do that. Because now if they did it, they could fight a constitutionality on it. So to get rid of that, to help protect our public and help protect our children, they wanted to put it in law that it was okay for a police officer to pose as a minor to entrap people for this, just to save kids.
Like so many things, people's lives get caught in the middle of this true, honest to God, brutal sex offenders and rapists and need to be stopped and
Right,
and 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 need treatment. And if treatment doesn't work, then they need to be confined.
right.
But it's as the pendulum swings, and we have swung way over the top of labeling people sex offenders and putting their lives in a bind. And I don't think that that was the original. I choose to believe that that was not the original intent of the people who began designing these laws. I would prefer to believe that people's hearts were in the right place when they started designing these laws. I know that that's a bit naive. I know that, but I just prefer to believe that because it's really hard for me to believe that people actually set out knowing that they were going to ruin people's lives that did not need to be ruined.
And what the public doesn't know is the registry today, compared to the registry 25 years plus ago when it first started, it has changed and it's gotten
Hmm.
worse and it's gotten worse.
Hmm.
But what makes the whole situation, if you look at it closely, if you go online and do a Google search of the history of the sex offender registry, you'll see the different laws that were created. And a lot of these were murder victims. And
Hmm.
there was no sexual component. It wasn't a stranger danger. It wasn't this person. It was just a child got murdered. And now we got to go after the sex offenders, because if it happened to this child, well, it could happen to another child. So we got to start protecting our children. And so those on the registry were starting to get that target because they just kept coming up with more and more laws. Many states actually have so many restrictions that it's tough to even have a place to live in cities. Just
Cedar
yes,
Cedar Rapids and Marion are not that easy to find a place to live.
no. Cedar Rapids and Marion are pretty much nothing unless you want to go live at the airport. And then, and how is
Or
that? How is that
there's a,
beneficial?
yeah, exactly.
You're
Exactly.
instead of
Exactly.
having them close to their resources, you're pushing them further and further away from them resources. So how are they supposed to be successful? How are they supposed to get to a job if they have to drive 30 miles to a town like Cedar Rapids because there's nowhere in Cedar Rapids for them to work? What happens if they need to have therapy and they have to
Mhm.
drive 20 miles round one way just to get therapy to continue to, be productive citizens and not go back to their old behaviors? We're pushing
Mhm.
people out of society with this label.
Mhm.
I mean, we could talk on this issue for hours, Sue,
For
hours.
hours.
And I
Yes,
am more
yes.
willing if you want to do another one and we can dig into this even deeper to educate, because I believe that's the most important thing.
I
And
think that's a good idea. And maybe what you could do, if you wouldn't mind, is look up some actual situations that have happened in Iowa. Like you gave a couple of examples,
yes,
but if we could have a, a, a plethora of
yes,
examples of how people got caught
absolutely.
in the trap, and that way the public can make their own decision about how they feel about this, because that's really what I want. I mean, I
Yep,
want people to make their own decision and not just take the media's word for it, or not just take your word for it, or not
right.
just take my word for it, not take just anybody's word for it, but actually become educated and informed on what has actually happened to people and what's happened to their lives, and what the intent of the law actually is. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I would love to do that, like in the next week or so, to follow up on this
Okay,
while it's still fresh in people's minds. If you want to do that, I
absolutely.
think that would be great. Okay.
Absolutely. And I will leave your viewers a little bit of information today where they can start their own education.
Okay.
I would first ask them to check out NARSOL, NARSOL.org. That's the National Association for Rational Sex Offender Laws. It's a national organization, and Iowans Unafraid is an actual state affiliate of NARSOL. And they have so many videos on their website. You can view some of their conferences where there is some individuals like Emily Horwitz who actually debate the registry. So there is lots of videos on their website. I encourage people to educate yourself. Watch some of these debates. You'll watch the pros and cons. Do we need the registry? Do we not? They have so many videos on their website.
Mhm.
And the other one I would ask you to check out is on YouTube, Florida Action Committee. They,
Florida Action Committee. Okay.
yes. And I will send you them links later, Sue, so you can put them into the comments for the individuals and they can click
Okay.
on them later.
Okay.
But Florida Action Committee just recently posted 3 PSAs. There is one on sexting and the dangers for our kids. And then they have two short 1 or 2 minute videos on the registry. They are loaded with so many facts and the truth. So I encourage you as public, start viewing these. Once you see these videos and these little shorts,
Mhm.
please, just like this video, share them. This
Mhm.
is how we get the message out. This is how we educate more and more people. This is how we educate our legislators. When I heard
Yes.
that this was going on with Florida Action Committee and their PSAs, that was the first thing I did was send it to my local legislators. And we've actually had some discussions with them about the registry. And they realize as legislators that it's gone overboard and they want
Yeah,
to make some changes. But they're, once again, they're afraid if they do too much and the public finds out because
exactly.
of all of the false information about the registry
Right.
that they're not going to get reelected because they're going to be like, well, they're not helping protect our kids. And in
Right.
reality, once you get educated, you will realize that we are actually harming our children. We are harming our children more by the registry than we are protecting them. Yes, we're saving one or two here or there, but we're destroying thousands and thousands of kids' lives every single day because of the registry.
Yes.
Not only do we advocate to get rid of the registry, we understand why it was created. We just want rational changes. Let's get
Right.
rid of our resident restrictions. Who cares where I sleep at night? If that was the case, if I really wanted to harm a child, I could probably go to my best friend's house who lives right across from the school. And if I was really wanted to do this. So these resident restrictions, all that does is push people further and further and further away from the necessary resources that they need.
Well, thank you. And on that, we can close for this time. That's a wonderful, wonderful closing statement that you just made. So
Thank
um,
you.
let's say good evening for now, and we'll be back sometime in the next, if you have time, sometime in the next week. Is that a fair statement to say that we can do this sometime in the next week?
I would say the next week or two.
Okay, in the next
Yep.
week or two. So
But
people
definitely.
know by the
Yes.
end of this month, let's say that by the
Yes.
end of April,
Absolutely.
we will have it done for sure.
And we'll
So,
bring some more facts for you guys. We'll
yes,
try to get more data here in Iowa. I will find some more data nationally for you guys because I want to educate you. Not only
yes,
do we want to educate about what life really is in prison, I'm glad Sue has given me this voice and so I can help educate you as the public. So thank you, Sue, for this opportunity.
well, you're more than welcome, and thank you for taking the interview, taking my lead in this, and wanting you to speak. Um, so we will close for this evening. And with that, I will say once again that I'm Sue Hutchins, and this is Iowa Prison Perspectives. And I have an email that's called Iowa Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. That's IA Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. And please, please, please comment and let us know what you think, what you really think about this topic and other topics if you watch any of the other interviews. Because this really is the only reason that I'm doing this is to give accurate information to the public and different perspectives of what prison is like and what reentry for people is like for the families as well as for the person who has been incarcerated. So I thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. And once again, I thank you, Amanda, very much for being willing to share all that you did. And we look forward to being back in a couple of weeks. So have a good week and we'll
Thank
talk to
you.
you later. Good
All
night for
right.
now.
Bye.